she said. You're lucky I even pick up your calls. I just smiled. Then I stopped calling. 1 week of silence later, she showed up at my doorstep in tears. I didn't think that sentence would stick with me the way it did, but it has been replaying in my head on a loop for the last 2 weeks. I'm busy. You're lucky I even pick up your calls. She said it casually. Not angry. Not joking either. Just flat, like she was stating a fact about the weather. For context, I'm Alex, 28M. She's Lauren, 26F. We've been together a little over a year. Lived separately, talked every day, saw each other most weekends. Or at least we used to. This happened on a Tuesday night. I had called her after work, same as always. Nothing dramatic. Just wanted to tell her about my day and hear about hers. She let it ring longer than usual, then finally answered with a sigh. What? She said. I laughed it off at first. Asked if I was interrupting something. She said, yeah, my life. That's when the line came out. You're lucky I even pick up your calls. I remember smiling, because that's what I do when I don't want someone to see they hit something sensitive. I made a joke, told her I'd let her go, and hung up. But the thing is, this wasn't new behavior. It was just the clearest version of it yet. Over the last few months, everything I did seemed to annoy her. If I texted good morning, she'd respond hours later with busy. If I didn't text, she'd accuse me of not trying. If I asked to see her, she'd say I was being clingy. If I didn't, she'd ask why I was distant. She criticized how I talked, how I dressed, how I chewed, how I parked my car. She corrected me in front of her friends, rolled her eyes when I told stories, made little jokes at my expense, and then called me sensitive when I didn't laugh hard enough. And yet, somehow, I kept calling, kept apologizing, kept trying to get back to whatever version of her I met at the beginning. That night, after she said that line, something shifted. Not dramatically. No anger. No big realization. Just quiet. I didn't call her the next day, or the day after that. I figured she wouldn't even notice. Day one of not calling felt weird, but manageable. I kept catching myself reaching for my phone out of habit, then stopping. I told myself I was just busy, which, for once, was actually true. Day two felt quieter. Not peaceful. Just empty in a way I hadn't noticed before. No passive-aggressive texts. No sighs on the other end of the line. No feeling like I was interrupting her existence just by wanting to talk. She didn't reach out. That part surprised me more than I expected. By day 3, I started replaying our last few conversations in my head. Not just the big moments, but the small ones. The way she'd interrupt me mid-sentence. How she'd check her phone while I was talking, then say, "Sorry, what?" and never actually wait for me to repeat myself. I remembered the time I showed up 10 minutes early to pick her up, and she snapped, "God, you're always so eager. Relax." Like caring was some embarrassing flaw I needed to outgrow. I also remembered how she'd bragged to her friends about being low maintenance, right after making a list of things I needed to fix about myself. By day 4, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't anxious. Normally, silence from her would make my stomach twist. I'd assume I did something wrong. I'd send a "Hey, everything okay?" text just to break the tension. I'd apologize preemptively for things I didn't even understand yet. This time, none of that happened. I still missed her, but it felt different. Less like panic, more like distance. Day 5 was when she finally texted, "Wow, guess you're mad at me now." I stared at that message for a long time. It wasn't, "Hey, are you okay?" or "Sorry if I was harsh." It wasn't even, "I miss you." It was an accusation. I typed out 3 different responses, deleted all of them. Eventually, I sent something simple. "Not mad, just giving you space." She didn't reply for hours. When she did, it was just, "K." That was it. No call, no follow-up. By the end of the week, something clicked that I hadn't fully admitted to myself before. The silence wasn't punishment. It was relief. And apparently, it was bothering her a lot more than it was bothering me. Day 6 was the first time she tried to bait me. She sent a selfie mid-afternoon. Nothing special. Just her in the car, sunglasses on, lips slightly pursed. No caption. No context. Just dropped it there like a hook. Normally, I would have responded instantly. Told her she looked good. Asked where she was going. Tried to restart whatever invisible countdown timer I was always racing against. This time, I didn't. I saw the message. I put my phone down. Finished what I was doing. An hour passed. Then 2. By the time I finally replied with a neutral, "Hope your day's going okay," she was already typing. "So now you're dry too? Did I do something, or are you just being weird on purpose?" Because this is honestly immature. That word again. Immature. She loved that one. It was her favorite way to shut down anything she didn't like. I read the messages without feeling the usual urge to defend myself. No spike of anxiety. No rush to explain my tone. I just answered calmly. I'm not trying to be anything. I'm just matching the energy you asked for. She didn't like that. She called me immediately. I let it ring once. Twice. Picked up on the third. What is going on with you? She demanded. You don't call. You barely text. And now you're acting all detached. I almost laughed at the irony. Almost. I reminded her of what she said the week before. About being lucky she even picked up my calls. I kept my voice steady. Not accusatory. Just factual. There was a pause. Then she scoffed. Oh my God, you're still on that? I was joking. You take everything so seriously. Of course. A joke. Everything hurtful was always a joke once it had consequences. She went on about how stressful her life was. How everyone needed something from her. How exhausting it was to deal with other people's emotions all the time, including mine. That's when I noticed something important. She never asked how I was doing. Not once. The call ended with her saying, I just don't like this version of you. After we hung up, I sat there for a while. Not angry. Not sad. Just clear. For the first time, I could see the pattern without being inside it. How my attention made her feel powerful. How my silence made her uneasy. How the balance only worked when I was the one reaching. And I realized something else too. I hadn't stopped calling to make a point. I'd stopped because, deep down, I didn't feel like I was wanted anymore. And that truth was starting to bother her. By day 7, the silence had become noticeable enough that other people commented on it. My buddy asked if Lauren and I were good because she hadn't posted me in a while. My sister joked that I sounded lighter on the phone, like I'd finally gotten a full night's sleep. Even I noticed it in small ways. How I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes. How my shoulders didn't tense when it buzzed. Lauren, on the other hand, was unraveling in stages. She started watching my stories again. Every single one. Within minutes. Didn't reply, didn't react, just watched. Like she needed proof I still existed in her orbit. Then came the vague posts on her end. Funny how people switch up when they don't get what they want. Protecting my peace lately. Some people don't know what they have. I knew those weren't for me directly. They were for the idea of me. For the version of me who would panic and reach out just to reassure her she was still in control. I didn't. That's when she tried something new. She texted me late that night. Almost midnight. I saw someone today who asked about you. Made me realize how much you've changed. I asked, in a bad way. 3 dots. Long pause. You used to care more. That one almost got me. Not because it was true, but because it was so familiar. She'd said it before whenever I stopped bending. I stared at the screen, thinking about all the times I cared quietly. All the rides I gave, plans I adjusted, apologies I made just to keep things smooth. All the ways caring had slowly turned into compliance. I still care, I typed. I just don't feel like begging to be tolerated anymore. She didn't respond. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from her. All between 6:30 and 7 a.m. She knew I was usually asleep then. It felt intentional. Like she wanted to disrupt my routine the way I used to let her disrupt my peace. When I finally called her back later that day, she answered immediately. So you do know how to use your phone, she said, sharp and smug at the same time. I told her calmly that I wasn't doing this back and forth anymore. That I needed consistency, not comments about how lucky I was to exist in her schedule. She went quiet. Then defensive. Then annoyed. This is dramatic, she said. You're acting like I'm some villain. I didn't argue. I just said, I'm acting like someone who's tired. There was a long pause after that. Long enough that I could hear her breathing. And for the first time, she sounded unsure. Not angry. Not dismissive. Just scared that the dynamic she relied on was slipping away. She hung up shortly after. 2 days later, she showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting her. That's the honest truth. It was a Sunday evening. Quiet. I had just finished cooking and was sitting on the couch when I heard a knock. Not a polite one either. Sharp. Urgent. Like whoever it was didn't plan on leaving without being acknowledged. When I opened the door, there she was. Lauren. Red-eyed. Mascara smudged. Hoodie I'd never seen before hanging off her shoulders like she'd grabbed it on the way out. She looked smaller somehow. Less composed. Nothing like the version of her that talked down to me on the phone. She didn't say hi. She didn't apologize. She just said, "Can I come in?" I hesitated. That alone seemed to throw her off. I stepped aside, and she walked past me like she used to, straight to the couch, dropping her bag on the floor like it belonged there. I don't understand what's happening, she said, voice cracking. You just stopped. I leaned against the counter instead of sitting next to her. That felt important. Space I hadn't taken before. She went on about how hard her week had been, how everyone kept disappointing her, how she felt abandoned. Every sentence was about her feelings, her stress, her confusion. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Why didn't you chase me?" That was the moment. Not the tears, not the shaking voice. That question. I told her the truth. That chasing someone who treats you like a nuisance eventually feels humiliating. That when she said I was lucky she picked up my calls, something inside me shut off. Quietly. Permanently. She shook her head, wiping her face. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you did say it like that," I replied. She tried to move closer. I didn't move. That frustrated her. I could see it. The tears slowed. Her tone shifted. "So what, you're just done now? After everything?" I thought about all the times I'd been afraid of this conversation. All the nights I'd rehearsed what I'd say if I ever stood up for myself. And I realized I didn't feel afraid at all. "I didn't stop calling to punish you," I said. "I stopped because I finally listened." She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You're really doing this," she muttered. "You're just giving up." I smiled. Not smug. Not angry. Just tired. "I'm choosing myself," I said. She didn't cry after that. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, "You'll regret this." Maybe. But as I closed the door behind her, all I felt was calm. And for the first time in a year, that felt like enough. I thought that would be the end of it. That's what I told myself as I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it for a second. Not in sadness. Just finality. Like closing a book you already know the ending to. For about 12 hours, there was silence. Then my phone lit up. Not from her. From mutual friends. "Hey man, is everything okay with you and Lauren? She seems really upset. Did something happen?" I didn't answer right away. I already knew the story she was telling. I'd heard versions of it before, whenever we had even the smallest disagreement. I was emotionally unavailable. I shut down instead of communicating. I walked away when things got hard. By the afternoon, she finally texted me. "I can't believe you embarrassed me like that." That was her takeaway. Not that she'd hurt me. Not that something broke. That I embarrassed her by not playing my part. I asked how I embarrassed her. "You let me cry alone," she replied. "Do you know how that makes you look?" There it was again. Image. Optics. How things looked mattered more than how they felt. I told her I wasn't interested in arguing through text. That if she wanted to talk, it needed to be respectful and honest. She sent a voice memo. Her tone was calm now. Too calm. The kind of calm she used when she felt she had the upper hand. She said she'd forgiven me for disappearing. Said relationships take work, and sometimes one person has to be the bigger one. She said she was willing to give us another chance if I promised not to shut her out like that again. Not a single apology. Just terms. I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. That night, she posted a story of her out with friends. Loud bar. Big smiles. Caption about healing. She wanted me to see it. Wanted me to wonder if I'd made a mistake. Instead, I noticed something else. She kept checking her phone. I know because one of her friends accidentally sent me a snap meant for their group chat. Lauren in the background, refreshing her screen, pretending not to care. That's when it really hit me. She wasn't upset that I'd stopped calling. She was upset that I'd stopped orbiting. And the more space I created, the more she realized how much of herself she'd built around being chased. 2 days later, she showed up again. This time, she wasn't crying. She was angry. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. Same knock. Same urgency. This time, I took a breath before answering. When I opened it, she didn't wait for an invitation. "You don't get to just rewrite the relationship and walk away like you're some victim," she said, stepping inside. No tears. No softness. Just anger sharpened into confidence. I closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. She hated that posture. Said it made me look closed off. I kept it anyway. She paced my living room like she owned it, talking fast. About how people were asking questions. About how she looked stupid crying at my place. About how unfair it was that I decided things without her. "You don't get to decide we're done," she snapped. "That's not how this works." I told her calmly that I wasn't deciding for her. I was deciding for me. She laughed. Not amused. Disbelieving. "So that's it," she said. "You're just done trying?" I thought about all the effort I'd poured in. All the times I'd swallowed words to keep peace. All the nights I'd felt small and told myself it was normal. "I stopped trying to convince someone to like me," I said. "That's not the same thing." That's when she went low. She brought up my insecurities. My past. Things I told her late at night when I trusted her. She said I was afraid of being alone. That I'd never do better. That she was the best I was going to get. A week ago, that would have crushed me. This time, it just sounded desperate. I looked at her and realized something quietly devastating. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of herself that felt important because I was always reaching. When I didn't respond the way she wanted, her voice cracked. Just for a second. You really don't care anymore, do you? I answered honestly. I care. I'm just not afraid anymore. She stood there, searching my face for something. Anger, regret, doubt. When she didn't find it, her expression hardened. Fine, she said. Don't come crawling back. I nodded. I wasn't planning to. She left without another word. And for the first time since we met, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd gotten myself back. The week after that was strangely quiet. No surprise visits. No angry texts. No cryptic social media posts aimed in my direction. It was like she'd finally decided to disappear, but not in a peaceful way. More like retreating to regroup. I figured that was it. Then, on Friday night, my phone buzzed. A long message. Paragraphs. The kind she used to send when she wanted control back, but needed to look reasonable doing it. She said she'd been reflecting. Said she realized she'd been harsh sometimes. Said relationships weren't perfect and people said things they didn't mean. Then came the pivot. She said my silence had hurt her deeply. That disappearing without warning was cruel. That I'd made her feel disposable. That if I'd just communicated instead of pulling away, none of this would have happened. I read it slowly. Twice. It was impressive, honestly. How she managed to apologize without apologizing. How every sentence circled back to how my reaction was the real problem. She ended it with, I just don't recognize you anymore. I almost replied. Almost explained. Almost fell back into old habits. Instead, I asked myself a simple question. Did I feel lighter without her? The answer came immediately. Yes. I typed one sentence. I didn't disappear. I stopped overextending myself. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. She replied with, wow. So cold. That word again. Cold. Detached. Different. Funny how those words only came out once I stopped being available on demand. She sent another message, shorter this time. If you walk away like this, don't expect me to be here when you realize you messed up. I stared at the screen, then locked my phone. For the rest of the night, I didn't check it once. The next morning, I woke up to a missed call from an unknown number. No voicemail. Then another. And another. I finally checked social media. She'd posted a story from a cafe I used to take her to. Same table. Same angle. Caption. Some people only value you when you stop giving. I almost laughed. Because for the first time, that was true. Just not in the way she thought. And later that evening, when the knocking started again, it sounded different. Not angry. Panicked. I almost didn't answer the door that night. Not because I was scared. Not because I was angry. But because some part of me already knew this wasn't going to change anything. When I opened it, Lauren looked undone. Not dramatic. Not performative. Just genuinely shaken. Her eyes were swollen again. But this time, she wasn't trying to hide it behind sarcasm or control. She stood there clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I don't know how to fix this, she said quietly. That was new. I stepped aside, and she came in slower this time, like she wasn't sure she still belonged in the space. She didn't sit. Just stood there, arms wrapped around herself. I didn't think you'd actually be okay without me, she admitted. You always needed me more. That sentence landed heavier than all the insults before it. I told her that wasn't love. That was imbalance. And I didn't realize how far it had gone until I stopped chasing. She nodded, tears falling again. I didn't mean to make you feel small. I know, I said. But you did anyway. She started listing things she'd do differently. Promises. Adjustments. Softer words. More appreciation. All the things I used to beg for in moments that came far too late. I listened. Really listened. And felt nothing. That's when I understood the truth I'd been circling for weeks. The relationship didn't end when I stopped calling. It ended the moment I stopped hoping she'd change. I'm not angry, I told her. I'm just done. She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. Not as someone to manage. Not as someone to correct. But as someone leaving. She whispered, so this is it? I nodded. She didn't argue. Didn't threaten. Didn't insult me. She just cried quietly for a minute, then walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned and said, I really thought you'd come back. I answered honestly. I came back to myself instead. She left without another word. And when the door closed, there was no rush of emotion. Just peace. It's been a few weeks since that night. No contact. No late-night texts. No just checking in messages disguised as concern. Just quiet, consistent distance. At first, I kept expecting the regret to hit. That delayed wave everyone warns you about. The loneliness. The what-ifs. It never came. What had come were small moments of clarity. Waking up without that familiar weight in my chest. Making plans without wondering if they'd annoy someone. Saying what I meant without rehearsing it first. I realized how often I used to brace myself before talking to her. How I'd scan her tone for approval. How I measured my words like they were currency I could run out of. That's not love. That's survival. I ran into her once, by accident, at the grocery store. She looked composed again. Polished. Like she'd put herself back together carefully. We nodded at each other. Nothing more. As I walked away, I noticed something strange. I didn't feel smaller. And I think that's the part that finally settled everything. She once told me I was lucky she picked up my calls. Turns out, I was lucky I stopped making them. Not because it hurt her, but because it saved me. If you're reading this and you feel like you're always reaching, always apologizing, always afraid of being too much for someone who makes you feel like you're barely enough, pay attention to how peaceful it feels when you stop. Sometimes the silence isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's clarity.